Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab, and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination, we take up a question that you might come across in GS paper 1. Here goes the question. Why have land reforms been more successful in some states while they have failed elsewhere? Discuss. So, you do have some idea about the concept of land reforms in India. What in the case of India, land reforms have meant that they have mostly focused on redistribution of excess land in the hands of the land holder, or rather the, you could say, landlords, to the, you could say, vast masses of the landless farmers. This has been the primary goal of land reforms. However, they had many fold goals. Some of the other goals were, for example, recognizing the tenure of the, you could say, tenant farmer. A tenant farmer is someone who does not own the land, but he has leased it in from the landlord. So these have been two most important objectives of the land reforms attempts in India. There have been some other objectives. For example, consolidating the fragmented landholding, something that we would define through the, you could say, lecture. What we are doing here, we are introducing our answer with going into the nature of land relations during the pre-independence era. That is, the exploitative nature of land relations under the three land revenue systems, the land, you could say, the land settlement systems, zamindari, rayatwari and mahalwari systems, meant disposition of a small peasant, that is the small farmer, and concentration of land in the hands of large landowners. So you are mostly aware that the pre-independence era, India had three main types of, you could say, land revenue systems. Those were the zamindari system, which mostly prevailed in parts of Bihar, Bengal and Odisha, and some, you could say, eastern UP, etc. There was the Rayatwari system, which was mostly prevailing. It mostly prevailed in the Madras Presidency, and the Mahalwari system, which was mostly attempted in the Punjab region. Bengal, Bihar and Odisha plus eastern UP, zamindari system. So what happened under all these three systems, there was, you could say, oppression of the peasant, and it led to disposition of a small peasant, that the small peasant was deprived of his land and the land was concentrated in the hands of the large landowners. This necessitated commitment to redistribution of land, as well as providing protection of tenure to contract farmer and sharecropper from arbitrary deprivation. The Congress governments elected after GOI Act of 1935 through the 1937 provincial elections, that is, the Congress governments which were elected after the 1937 provincial elections had already legislated land reform laws like the Bihar Tenancy Act and some other acts as well, for example the Bakast Land Act, etc., to protect tenant farmers. Post independence, even the constitution was amended through the first amendment of 1951 to shield state land reforms laws from judicial challenge. Please try to appreciate it that land reforms has been such a hot topic in India, such a hot potato in India actually, that to protect the land reform laws after the independence, after the constitution coming into effect, the first constitutional amendment had to be, you could say, made as earlier as 1951, and this meant that the laws that would be meant to carry land reforms won't be challenged in the higher courts. And you are almost certainly aware that the first amendment also inserted the 9th schedule in the constitution, This schedule actually contains some of the laws that cannot be challenged before the highest judiciary. Nowadays, obviously, you can challenge it. That is the laws under 9th schedule in the higher judiciary. Anyway, the point is, however, with the notable exceptions of Kerala, Bengal, and Tamil Nadu, land reforms have not been much successful in other states. So what have been the reasons that there have been statewide differences in experience of land reforms? Taking up these reasons one by one, first is there has been variation in political will. Some of the states have actually displayed greater political will to back land reforms compared to some other states. And this political will was mostly based on ideological plank. That is the ideology that the particular government in power held. There has been variations in data, including land records. In some of the states, they have been more updated and more detailed compared to some other areas. You can appreciate it that these land records have been mostly updated in the case of the Rayatwari areas. Again, why has been it so? You can appreciate that under the Rayatwari system, the relation between the government and the farmer was more direct. That is, the farmer, you could say, related with the government. He actually came into the contact with the government directly. This meant that the records were, you could say, of greater detail and more updated. There have been too many exceptions. For an example, to land ceiling. Land ceiling actually means the highest limit of land that a landlord or landowner can hold. And what these exceptions actually do, they complicate the administrative effort. You can actually connect this with a more current example that they have been called for doing away with most of the exemptions that the income tax laws provide. On the, you could say, the justifiable reason that all these complications actually lead to greater, you could say, arbitrariness in the administration of the tax law, and moreover, they often lead to some forms of evasion because they create escape routes. This has been a similar case in the case of land reforms attempts as well. There have been some conflicting objectives. For an example, consolidation of fragmented holdings, which directly goes against land redistribution. Again, try to appreciate it, why land should be consolidated in the first place. You can understand, due to the succession laws in India, the land has been divided so many times. The land has been partitioned one generation after generation. This means once someone's land holding would be fragmented. That is, one piece of land would be here, the other piece would be there. So basically, suppose someone had 2 acres of land and it was distributed across 5-6 parcels. So it would be virtually impossible to actually, you could say, use farm machines, the farm machinery in small parcels of land. So it would be better if their land holdings could be consolidated. This was the primary reason why land consolidation was included among the, you could say, objectives of land reforms in India. But you can also appreciate that consolidation goes against the objectives, that is land redistribution, as we would discuss how. There have been some unintended consequences. For an example, repossession of land by the landlord or owner. Actually, what has happened, if there has been political rhetoric around land reforms, that is redistribution of land and, you could say, securing the tenure of the tenant farmer, etc. But there has been no action from the political class, and what it has meant that the landlord or landowner has actually become fearful of losing his land, and they have repossessed this land from the tenant farmer on one pretext or other. So this has essentially meant to be the disposition of the already, you could say, hapless tenant. Detailing these points, some states have displayed greater political will in committing to redistribution and securing tenures. States like West Bengal and Kerala have carried out land reforms on a mission mode. 2 particular, you could say, missions that these states have launched was the West Bengal's Operation Burga, which was started around 1978, and thereafter it was mostly meant to securing the tenures. Securing tenures, that is the Burgas, the Burgadars, or the, you could say, sharecroppers, tenure holders, etc. And Kerala's Land Reforms Act of 1969. These were concrete manifestation of communist ideology. You can please actually recall that both these states, that is West Bengal and Kerala, have been under communist leaning governments, communist leaning alliances at one part or at one time or other. And mostly due to their communist ideologies, their governments have been more committed to land reforms, especially land redistribution. Some states like, you can understand, Tamil Nadu, which fell under Madras Presidency, had access to good quality data like land records and tenancy rights because it was essentially under Rayatwari. Sorry, it is RYOT. It was under Rayatwari settlements. This made their land reforms more effective because the government had actual data on how much land someone possesses. Some regulations like land ceiling have provided for exceptions, like joint family holding, land for charitable purpose, etc., and for plantations, etc. These exemptions complicate the administrative effort and they actually create escape routes. You can understand very well what has happened, that if there have been exceptions provided in the land reforms regulations, for example charitable purpose, so what would happen, the landlords have actually forced documents to transfer their land to, you could say, some charitable institution, but in reality, that is in fact actually they have always been possession of this surplus land which they would have otherwise lost due to the ceiling regulations. So all of these have actually created some form of escape routes for the large landlords. Land reforms have set some conflicting objectives. Experience tells that consolidation to bring fragmented holdings together leads to dispossession of small peasants, like the enclosure movement in 18th 19th century Europe. So there has been actual example that land consolidation, that is actually consolidation of land holdings, would lead to dispossession of the small farmer, small peasant, whose land would come in the way of the larger landholder. You can appreciate very well that the larger landowner or even the landlord would simply buy out the small peasant, either through, you could say, giving better price, or even through various forms of coercion. So these objectives, for example land consolidation and, you could say, more equitable distribution of land, are mutually conflicting sometimes. An unintended consequence of political rhetoric not followed by action has been repossession of land by landlords from the tenant on pretext of self-cultivation. That the landlord has he has made this excuse that he wanted this land back for self-cultivation. This paranoia for permanently losing land has only harmed the interests of the tenant sharecropper. So even the you could say tenuous claim the tenant sharecropper had on the land has been lost because the landlord has actually repossessed his land on the pretext of using it for self-cultivation. Now the conclusion we are making here, that it's an important point, you may agree or disagree with it, but the point we are trying to make it that with rise in population and with successive partition, that is the intergenerational transfer of the land, the average land holding has reduced 40% to 1 hectare since 1950s. So you can understand during 1950s it was almost 2.5 hectares. This means prioritizing non-farming employment over land redistribution. You can understand it very well because the land parcels are already fragmented, that is the land holdings are already small, not fragmented, that is they are as small as 1 hectare, or rather 2.5 hectare. That is a small, you could say, size of land. So if we were to distribute from this size of land, it would essentially mean distributing rural poverty. We would repeat it: due to the large number of, you could say, claimants on land, redistributing this land would essentially mean redistributing rural and, in fact, agricultural poverty. So the focus is rather on creating industrial employment, non-farm employment, so we can shift this surplus labor that often leads to disguised unemployment. You do understand that this concept, disguised unemployment, is due to large number of, you could say, agricultural workers, and this often leads to, you could say, negative margins for the farmer. So anyway, the point is, the nowadays the priority is shifting the large number of farm laborers, farm workers to the industrial employment, so that the burden on the pressure on the rural land holdings would decrease, and essentially everyone would be in far better position. That is, the farmer would have larger, you could say, sufficiently large land holding to actually make some profit. So this was all on the failure of land reforms in most of the India, except the some of the states like Bengal, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, etc., and the reasons why this has been so. We would reassemble for the next lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.